Sam Ward was positioned at his window, his calloused hands resting upon the sill as he observed the twilight descend. 45 winters had unfolded in his life, and this current one seemed the most protracted. His beard was beginning to show white at the chin, and his shoulders bore sorrow as if it possessed tangible mass, which it indeed did. 3 years prior, he had interred his wife beneath a cottonwood tree that inclined toward the creek, as though it too had succumbed to a break. Since that time, Sam had existed in quietude, not from an inability to articulate, but because there was no one to whom speaking felt worthwhile. The cabin retained the imprint of her memory. Her woven shawl still lay on the back of a chair he perpetually avoided. A shelf holding dried herbs collected dust, undisturbed since her fingers last put them in order. He continued to sleep on only one side of the bed, though the other side had long since grown cold. There had been a child once, also, a daughter who never drew her initial breath. Following that, Sam ceased constructing cradles. He built fences, repaired saddles, and maintained his solitude. The townsfolk whispered about the reserved man who visited once a month and communicated only when currency was exchanged. Some speculated he had been driven mad by sorrow. Others contended he had always been inclined that way. That particular evening, as the sky darkened into nightfall, he detected it, a sound alien to the wind, faint and faltering. He initially suspected a coyote, perhaps injured, traversing the firm ground, but as he emerged, shotgun in hand, more from ingrained behavior than any sense of menace, he saw her. She was lying in the snow under the cedar near the barn, curled upon herself as if the wind had sculpted her into emptiness. Her dress was ripped at the sleeve, and blood saturated the material from her shoulder to her wrist. She was barefoot, youthful, and as motionless as the deer he had hunted in lean times. For an extended moment, Sam merely gazed at her still, the way an individual might stare at something whose reality they find hard to accept. And then he lowered his firearm. He posed no questions about her identity. He did not inquire about her origins. He simply raised her with gentle arms, as though concerned she might disintegrate at a mere touch. She weighed less than his grief, and carried the aroma of river water and smoke. Upon crossing the cabin's threshold, it felt as if he were bringing a tempest indoors. He placed her near the fireplace and enveloped her in the sole blanket not saturated with memories. She moved slightly, her lips parched and chapped, uttering words in a tongue he did not comprehend, but resonated deep within him. Comanche, perhaps. He had not encountered any of their tribe near this territory for years, not since the soldiers had passed through, expelling them in the pursuit of peace. Yet this girl, no older than 20, appeared to be fleeing something more than just soldiers. He filled a basin with warm water and carefully cleansed the blood from her skin. A gash was on her arm, deep but not life-threatening. It had bled sufficiently to enfeeble her, yet the injury was clean. He sutured it with the quiet proficiency of a man who had once performed such tasks for a living, prior to the war, before the farm, preceding everything. She observed him through partially open eyes, wincing only a single time when the needle pierced her flesh. He uttered nothing. She offered no reply. When he had completed the task, he stepped outside to cleanse his hands in the snow and allow the wind to lighten the heaviness in his chest. The moon was ascending, projecting long shadows across the prairie. He gazed at the cedar tree for a considerable time. It had once been his wife's cherished tree. Every spring she had planted wildflowers around its base. They ceased to return after her passing. Inside, the girl had drawn nearer to the fire, now asleep. Her respiration was shallow yet consistent. Sam lingered in the doorway for a period, one hand on the frame, then shifted to his chair by the fire and seated himself. He made no attempt to sleep, nor did he watch her. He simply gazed at the flames and recalled the last occasion he had shared this space with another's breath. He assured himself she would be departed by dawn. Yet morning arrived, and she was still there. She awoke before sunrise, sitting erect with an alertness stemming from fear. Sam had placed a piece of cornbread and some jerky on a plate near her. She reached for it in the manner a cornered creature might, swift, wary. He sat at the table, sipping coffee, neither observing her directly nor disregarding her. When her eyes met his, they held no demand, no entreaty, no sign of gratitude, merely an uneasy understanding between strangers. "You are secure here," he stated, his voice hoarse from lack of use. "For the present." She offered no response, but neither did she flee. The snowfall intensified that day. Sam attended to the livestock, inspecting fences and fracturing the ice in the water trough. He moved slowly with his usual methodical pace. Upon his return, she had swept the hearth clean and folded the blanket. He observed her gaze lingering on the cupboard, the shelves of preserved provisions. Hunger was an unspoken affliction, yet it etched lines into one's countenance all the same. He prepared a stew that evening: beans, salt, pork, wild onion. She consumed it unhurriedly, her actions precise, almost ritualistic. He noted she chewed on only one side of her mouth and surmised a bruise on the other, concealed beneath her dark hair. He did not inquire who had caused her injury. She did not volunteer the information. That night the storm grew more severe. The wind wailed like a creature lamenting its own sound. Sam fed the fire and offered her the bed. He slept in the chair. It was not an act of compassion, he told himself, merely practicality. The bed was warmer. She was recuperating. That was the extent of it. In the depth of the night, he awoke to discover her standing by the window. Her silhouette appeared sharp against the fire's illumination. Her eyes surveyed the horizon, vigilant for something or someone. He rose deliberately. "Are you anticipating trouble?" She turned towards him, then truly regarded him. A prolonged silence ensued, weighty and delicate. Then she gave a single nod. Sam reflected that he had encountered trouble in numerous guises: war, famine, bereavement. Yet this felt distinct. This was not his personal trouble. Nevertheless, it had somehow already established itself within his life. He traversed the room and retrieved a blanket from a chair. "You will remain tonight. We will address the remainder come morning." She observed him with an unreadable expression. Not confidence, not yet, but not apprehension either. He went back to his chair, tilted his head back, and hearkened to the fire's crackle as the wind assailed the walls. Something within him had altered, though he could not identify it. The silence no longer possessed the quality of morning. When daylight seeped through the shutters, pink and faint, Sam ventured outside to feed the horses. He hadn't observed fresh tracks for weeks, but this morning his breath hitched, hoof prints, numerous, encircling the cabin like a constricting rope. He glanced towards the ridge and beheld them. Riders, scores, possibly more, with painted faces and spears glinting in the sunlight. A figure at their vanguard sat erect in his saddle, his cloak billowing like an avian appendage. Comanche. Sam's chest constricted, not from fear, but with a frigid lucidity. He slowly pivoted back towards the dwelling. Inside, the girl stood near the fire, her eyes wide, yet unsurprised. He uttered nothing, nor did she. And in that quietude, an unspoken communication transpired between them. A silent acknowledgement that neither was safe, yet neither would flee. Not any longer. The morning light ascended slowly and with a bruised quality, throwing long pinkish streaks across the snow-laden plains. The air was crisp with cold, sharp enough to sting the lungs, and so still that every sound traveled a great distance. Sam Ward stood outside, one hand resting on the fence rail, the other clutching a dented tin cup of coffee that had grown tepid. He sipped without registering the taste, his gaze monitoring a shift on the horizon. He had been a rancher for a sufficient duration to recognize when the world fell silent in an ominous manner. The birds had not sung. No rabbits scurried from the undergrowth. Even the wind had abated, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Then came the shimmer, barely perceptible initially, a distortion in the distance. Dust stirred. The sound followed next, the low, rhythmic thunder of hooves. He remained motionless. Not at first. He placed the cup down on the fence post with deliberation, as if apprehensive of disturbing something ancient. Then he turned and proceeded towards the cabin, his boots producing a soft crunch in the frost-covered snow. Inside, the girl was positioned at the hearth, winding a strip of linen more tightly around her mending arm. Her hair had been loosely braided back, and a new alertness marked her posture, not fear, but a state of readiness. "They have arrived," Sam stated. She looked up, and her eyes, already wide, seemed to gaze into the distance. He reached for the Winchester rifle above the doorway but did not retrieve it. His hand paused, then lowered. The rifle would be of no assistance to him now. He stepped outside once more, and this time she accompanied him. The horses came into clear view then, cresting the low ridge like a surge of earth, bone, and motion. There were numerous, 60, perhaps 70, all mounted, all silent. Their advance was measured, not an assault, but a declaration of presence. They rode as a unified body, their formation compact and unsettlingly quiet, the snow dampening even the sound of their hooves. Leading them was a man enveloped in a cloak fashioned from black wolf fur. His face was adorned with streaks of red that coursed like marks of war down his cheeks. His horse was the sole one embellished with feathers, woven into its mane and tail, each feather dyed with ochre and ash. His expression was inscrutable, as if hewn from ancient stone and imbued with profound knowledge. He halted a dozen yards from the cabin, and the others formed a broad, encompassing ring behind him, surrounding the house without a single weapon being raised. The girl stepped forward before Sam could utter a word. She did not elevate her voice. It was unnecessary. "Father," she stated. The man on horseback remained silent. His gaze swept over her, then settled on Sam. Sam stood motionless, arms hanging loosely at his sides, feet firmly planted. He did not speak. There was no purpose in articulating something for which neither man possessed the words. He merely observed, attempting to comprehend what this father perceived. A disheartened white man with a cabin filled with specters, standing beside his only daughter. The silence extended long enough for the wind to reassert itself, brushing along the periphery of the assembly like a breath attempting to rekindle a flame. Then the father spoke, his voice a low, grave rumble. "You gave her shelter." It was not an inquiry. Sam offered a slow nod. The Comanche leader dismounted, the snow crunching beneath his boots. He advanced with a serene authority, the manner in which some men approach battle or prayer. When he stopped, he was merely a few paces from Sam, close enough to attack, close enough to observe the lines of sleeplessness etched upon each other's faces. The girl positioned herself between them. She elected not to go back, she said softly, yet with a conviction that required no amplification. The warriors remained still, as did Sam. The father's eyes, dark and ancient, shifted towards his daughter, then returned to Sam. "She ventured into death," he stated, "and you restored her breath." "I provided her with nothing," Sam responded. "She reclaimed it herself." The girl's father regarded him for an extended moment, something altering within him, not a softening, but a recalibration, a taking of the man's measure before him. His hand rose deliberately. Sam grew tense, but it was only to touch the girl's chin. "You are not a young child," he said to her, "and yet I wish to make decisions for you." She did not recoil. "I did not flee from you. I fled from men who seized more than they were entitled to." That statement struck the air like silent thunder. The leader then looked away, towards the open prairie beyond Sam's homestead. The past lay stretched out there, interwoven with blood, treaties, silence, and sorrow. He turned back to Sam. "My warriors will not engage today." Relief, subtle and swift, eased the girl's shoulders, but Sam did not let down his guard. He discerned the unstated implication. "But they may come again," the father went on. "Not in amity. You are granted 3 days. Then I shall arrive not as a father, but as a chief." He remounted with a graceful motion. There was no theatrical departure, no shouted order. The circle of warriors slowly pivoted with him, their horses moving like a tide influenced by an unseen moon. Within minutes, they had vanished, leaving behind only disturbed snow, and the receding thud of hooves. Sam remained watching until even the final silhouette disappeared into the horizon's haze. He exhaled then, not profoundly, merely enough to feel the breath depart his body. Inside, the cabin had become chilly. The fire had diminished to embers. He added more wood to it, sparks leaping like startled avians. The girl now sat on the edge of the bed, her expression unreadable. "You ought to go with them," Sam remarked, not without kindness. She looked up. "And venture where? Back to quietude? Back to marrying some man who perceives me merely as a name on a pact?" He possessed no reply. She appended, almost softly, "You provided me a room that did not lock. That was sufficient." He occupied himself with the fire once more, not because it required attention, but because he could not look at her for too long without sensing a shift beneath his skin. He did not yet know how to handle it. 3 days. He tallied them like grains of sand in an hourglass, each one a prospect of losing her or retaining her. Later that evening, as the wind gusted across the chimney opening, Sam sat by the window, a mug in his hand, and his thoughts veering too close to territories he had long shunned. She was across the room, weaving a strip of leather into something that might become a pouch or perhaps a narrative. Her hands moved with a sense of purpose, as if she had performed this action her entire life, as if creating something new was a quiet method of recovering something old. He observed her from the periphery of his vision, not from desire, not yet, but with a sense of wonder. Of all individuals to arrive at his doorstep, why her? Why at this moment? She noticed him watching, did not smile, did not avert her gaze. "You do not fear them," she stated. "No. Why? I have already experienced the loss of what most men dread losing." She nodded slowly. "I have not, but I have come close." The fire crackled. Outside, a coyote yelped in the distance. Sam looked towards the sound but said nothing. "I will not request that you keep me," she said, her voice low. "But I will not depart unless you compel me to." He looked at her then, truly looked. She was not soft in the manner his wife had been. She did not possess lightness or easy laughter. She carried the weight of storms, silence, and the tenacious root of something burgeoning in scorched earth. He did not instruct her to leave. He did not say she could remain. He merely stood and tended the fire again. And she resumed her weaving, and the world turned one breath nearer to whatever was to come. Outside, the imprints of 70 horses remained etched into the snow, a caution, a pledge, or perhaps a sign left by destiny's own hand. And somewhere within Sam's chest, something long and active began to stir, as quiet as the breeze before it begins to sing. The following morning dawned subdued and pale, a sky the shade of thinly stretched linen over the horizon. The snow had not disappeared, but it had softened, the sharp edge of winter momentarily blunted. Sam Ward emerged into the stillness, the gravity of the Comanche chief's words like stones in his coat pocket. 2 days were left. He kept himself occupied in the manner of men burdened with more thoughts than they can manage. Feed the horse. Inspect the tack. Repair the coop wire. The girl moved about the cabin like a specter made corporeal. Her touch was light, her steps deliberate yet never hesitant. He noted how she undertook small chores without prompting. She swept the hearth, cleaned his tin plates, folded blankets, and once, after dusk, refilled the woodpile with an armful she had gathered herself. They still communicated little. Words between them were selected with care, like water during a drought. But the silence had transformed. It was no longer a barrier. It was something gentler, a space they both inhabited. She inquired about his wife's name. That was the first instance her voice carried intent. "Marjorie," Sam uttered, as quiet as falling snow. She said nothing further. But later that day he observed she had placed the old shawl, the one Marjorie used to wear while baking, neatly folded at the bed's foot. She had taken the one from the chair's back instead. He watched her more frequently now, not with longing or ardor, but with a steady, unsettling curiosity. The girl was younger than the years inscribed in her eyes. There was a quietness about her indeed, but it was not devoid of substance. It was shaped like someone who had listened extensively before ever being permitted to speak. She possessed a way of observing animals that reminded him of Marjorie, her head tilted slightly, as if attempting to comprehend their tongue. One morning he discovered her crouched near the coop, extending a morsel of biscuit to the hen that had once pecked his palm raw. The bird accepted it delicately from her hand. Later that day, he passed her a piece of leather, supple and darkened by the sun, and remarked, "Thought you might wish to create something from it." She nodded, then met his gaze and said, "Thank you." The words landed gently, yet with significance. In the evenings they sat by the fire, near but never in contact. She sang once, not loudly, not for his benefit. A low lullaby in Comanche, filled with images of sand, wind, and smoke. He did not inquire about the meaning of the words. Some things were not intended for translation. Instead, he listened. He began to speak again, incrementally, not narratives, not yet, just fragments. She learned he had once served as a medic in the war, the one where brother fought brother, and fields turned crimson. He informed her he ventured west, not in search of gold, but because the tranquility here appealed to him. She posed no inquiries, and he appreciated that characteristic in her. One evening, as dusk colored the sky's edge, he came back from town with provisions. Miss Lahi, the shopkeeper, had regarded him strangely when he purchased fabric and tea. Her mouth had tightened when he requested an additional tin cup. "You have company, Sam?" she inquired, her tone sharper than the question itself justified. "I have someone staying temporarily," he responded. She squinted. "Company isn't always desirable company." "She's not trouble," he stated. "She's a Comanche girl," Lahi murmured, as if the word itself might sour if uttered aloud. "They possess a knack for making even quiet men behave erratically." Sam had settled his bill and departed without further comment. That night, he produced the fabric and placed it on the table without ceremony. The girl regarded it for a considerable time before extending her hand and touching it, just a light caress of her fingers over the blue cotton. She did not speak, but her expression conveyed something akin to gratitude. The subsequent morning, he discovered her sewing it into a tunic. Her handiwork was so precise it might have been executed by a machine. She labored by the fire, sunlight glinting from the needle. She appeared serene, yet her eyes frequently darted towards the window. Sam took note. "Are you expecting them back before tomorrow?" She nodded. "They will not delay." He did not inquire if she felt fear. Later, as the wind intensified and the clouds gathered low, Sam saddled his mare and journeyed to the canyon ridge that afforded a view of the trail. He observed nothing. Not yet, but he sensed it. The gravity of what was approaching, the tension in the atmosphere, had a palpable edge. Upon his return, the cabin was filled with the aroma of broth. She had utilized what he brought: dried beans, carrot, a piece of pork. She gestured for him to be seated, ladled out 2 portions, and set them on the table. It was the first occasion they had shared a meal that felt like a communion rather than mere sustenance. Afterwards, he stood beside the hearth, observing the fire consume the kindling. She stood behind him, not close, not touching, but present. "I dreamt of a river last night," she said. "Back in my homeland I was young again. My mother cleansed my hair in the shallow waters. I had not thought of her for years." He turned slightly. She passed away. She nodded. "Fell ill in the winter. No remedies available." His throat struggled with words that remained unuttered. "You remind me of her," she stated. "You listen in the same manner she did, as if every silence is a phrase you are still deciphering." He was unsure how to respond to that, so he articulated what he could. "You are not what I anticipated, nor are you." They did not converse after that, but something unclosed, something altered. The following day he demonstrated to her how to fashion rawhide into reins, how to secure them with knots robust enough to withstand a resisting horse. She, in turn, taught him a different type of knot, the kind employed to bind sinew to arrow shafts. They worked alongside each other in the yard as the wind eddied between them, dispersing wisps of hay and snow. It felt akin to constructing something. It felt like a form of language. That evening she braided his horse's mane, humming softly. He observed her hands, watched the way her fingers moved, agile, exact, deliberate. She glanced up once, catching his gaze, and smiled, just the faintest upturn of her lips. It unraveled something within him. She remained by the fire longer that night. He did not request her to, but he did not stir either. When she rested her head against the arm of his chair, her hair brushing his arm, he did not withdraw. They sat thus, two silhouettes merged by warmth. He wished to speak. He wished to say, "I am unsure what this is, but it is more than mere quietude." He wished to tell her about the dreams he had begun experiencing again, of holding his daughter, of Marjorie laughing in the spring breeze, but he refrained. The next morning there were imprints in the snow again. Not near the dwelling, not yet, but sufficiently close. The time had diminished. He watched her from the porch. She stood by the cedar tree, her hand on its trunk, her eyes closed. She resembled someone bidding farewell. "Do you believe they will take you?" he inquired when she returned inside. "They will attempt to. I could depart. Ride with you. Get you beyond the ridge." She shook her head. "If you flee, they will pursue more intensely. They will assume you abducted me, that it was about domination, not preference." His jaw tightened. "And if I inform them otherwise, they will not credit you. Not initially. You are not one of them. You are not one of us." He stared at her, the fire crackling in the background. "Then who are we?" She looked at him, and her eyes, dark, intense, wounded, held a tender quality. "Perhaps we represent the communication between." That night the tempest returned, but not with snow. With wind and dust and a sky filled with agitated clouds, they sat near the fire, knees almost touching, their breaths synchronizing in a slow cadence. He told her then, at last, about his daughter, about the small grave beneath the cottonwood, and how he could not bring himself to give her a name, because naming something implied a belief that it had truly existed. She took his hand, clasped it. Her fingers were rougher than Marjorie's had been, yet warmer, stronger. "I believe she existed," she said, "even if only within your dreams." He could not reply. He wanted to kiss her, but refrained. Not yet. The moment called only for closeness. They slept in the same chamber that night, he in the chair, she on the bed, but neither truly slept. The atmosphere was too charged with anticipation. In the darkness he murmured, "What is your name?" "Nahili." He savored it, allowed it to rest on his tongue. "Nahili." She inhaled as if she had not heard it spoken in that manner for years. Outside, the wind changed direction and mourned. The ultimate morning awaited just beyond the brink of slumber. The dawn arrived devoid of color. A sky stretched taut with ash and wind. The landscape had altered overnight. It no longer felt like a tranquil place. It felt like a drumhead stretched excessively tight, on the verge of snapping. The air was agitated, each gust plucking at the world's edges like unseen hands probing for vulnerability. Sam stood at the porch's periphery, a worn woolen blanket draped over his shoulders, his gaze fixed on the horizon. There was no longer any need for conjecture. The Comanche would arrive today. The boundary had been established, not with utterances, but with quietude, with hooves that had encircled the dwelling, and eyes that burned without ever elevating a voice. Inside, Nahili moved with deliberate slowness, her countenance unreadable. She braided her hair back firmly, secured her tunic with a leather thong, and inspected the stitching along the bandage on her arm. She attired herself not as a young woman awaiting rescue, but as someone steeling herself for what was to come, regardless of its form. Sam observed her through the doorway. He wished to inquire about her intentions, but a part of him already understood. She had not sought refuge here. She had remained for autonomy. And now that the decision stood sharply defined and imminent, she would confront it, not evade it. He prepared coffee, though his hands trembled just sufficiently to spill a few droplets onto the counter. She joined him at the table, and for a period they simply sat, two individuals enveloped in quiet, attempting to commit the stillness to memory before it disappeared. She initiated the conversation. "They will desire my return, not solely because I am a chief's daughter, but because I departed without authorization. They perceive me as their possession." "You do not," Sam stated softly, "belong to anyone." Her eyes met his. "That is not their perception. A woman taken or sheltered is considered a woman claimed. They will not inquire why you assisted me. They will presume they already comprehend." He looked down at his calloused hands. "Then we shall inform them. They may not heed us. Then we shall compel them." She regarded him as if discerning something more profound beneath his quiet demeanor, not obstinacy, but a resolve tempered by sorrow. She reached across the table and laid her fingers upon his. They remained there for a considerable duration. By midday, the clouds had massed thick and low, pregnant with an unnamed storm. The wind dragged dust across the ground in eddies, whispering cautions against the cabin walls. The initial peal of thunder did not originate from the sky. It emanated from the earth, the returning hooves. Sam stepped outside once more. He had lubricated the rifle that morning but left it propped inside the door. It would be of no assistance to him today. This was not a conflict of projectiles or steel. This was something more ancient. The horses approached in a tighter formation this time. No encircling, merely a line across the field, a barricade of riders adorned in war paint and maintaining silence. At their core stood Chief Navo, his wolf pelt cloak on shoulders as broad as ever, but his expression was tense. His gaze located Nahili as soon as she emerged. She did not conceal herself behind Sam. She stood beside him, her eyes unwavering, her spine erect. Navo raised a hand, and the warriors behind him dismounted. Still no weapons were drawn, but the weight of their intent hung palpably, as dense as the storm clouds overhead. "Your allotted days have passed," Navo declared. "Now she comes back." "She is not an object," Sam retorted. "She is a daughter," Navo countered. "That is not possession. That is a tie. And when a tie is severed, something perishes." Nahili advanced a step. Her voice was composed, each word carefully chosen. "Then allow it to perish." If it was founded on silence that provoked a murmur among the warriors. Navo's jaw grew taut. "You speak like one who has forgotten kinship. I speak like one who has witnessed the consequences when kinship is the sole bond." Navo drew nearer now, his eyes intensely focused on hers. "You would remain with a man unfamiliar with our customs, unable to communicate with our ancestors, who will never tread the path to which you were born." "I would remain with a man who allowed me to be myself," she stated, "who recognized me before he required me to be anything." Navo's gaze shifted to Sam, and for a protracted moment, father and widower stood once more at that unspoken juncture. No man raised his voice. No man stirred. "You abducted her," Navo asserted. "I opened an entrance," Sam replied. "She passed through it. You cherish her." The words hung in the void between wind and quiet. Sam looked at Nahili and then back. "I have lost all that I held dear. And yet, I would not request her to stay unless it was her desire." Navo inclined his head slightly, as if attempting to discern something further beneath the spoken words. Then, unhurriedly, he detached a blade from his belt. A ceremonial knife, ancient and inscribed with time-worn carvings. He stepped forward and presented it, not as a menace, but as a proposal. "A man does not gain a daughter," he stated. "He demonstrates whether he will yield under her burden or bear it with dignity." Sam regarded the knife but did not accept it. Navo went on. "We have a custom. You will accompany me on a hunt. One deer, one trail. If you traverse it without faltering, then I will comprehend the sort of man you are." Sam remained silent for a moment, then acquiesced. Nahili touched his hand as he prepared to depart, her grasp neither frantic nor imploring, merely warm, present. The men rode forth together, chief and rancher, into the low-lying hills where the sagebrush flourished and the trees served as windbreaks. The deer they located was neither old nor young, a buck with wide eyes and sharp ears. Navo gestured to Sam, giving him the opportunity. Sam took the bow, the very one Nahili had strung days before, and moved through the undergrowth as he had during wartime. He did not hasten. He did not compel the instant. When he released the arrow, it struck just aft of the shoulder, clean and precise. They carried the deer back as the rain finally commenced, not heavily, but persistently, as if something long restrained had been let go. The warriors stood in anticipation, their expressions inscrutable. Navo dismounted and stood before Sam once more. "You do not communicate like us," he stated. "You do not understand our vocabulary, but your deeds convey what your words do not." Then, without formality, he turned to Nahili. "You are no longer part of my hearth," he said, "but you are not absent from my heart." He touched her forehead with 2 fingers, then turned and walked to his horse. The warriors mounted. No conflict ensued. No blood was shed, only departure, only rain. When the sound of hooves receded once more into the expectant horizon, Sam and Nahili stood alone in the quiet. The storm did not rage, it wept. They entered the cabin in silence. She removed her damp tunic and enveloped herself in one of Marjorie's old shawls, and he hung his coat to dry. The fire hissed where the logs were moist, but its warmth remained constant. She approached him slowly, her hands unadorned, her eyes raw. "You did not falter," she remarked. "Was unaware I had a choice. I was prepared to depart. I would have permitted you." She drew nearer, and he allowed her. There was no quivering now, no breath held in check. "I desire to remain," she stated. He reached out, touched her cheek. Her skin was moist from the rain, yet warm. "Then remain," he said, as if nothing else in the world were simpler or more hallowed. And in that instant, the storm abated. Later, he would recall the way the rain struck the roof like a soothing melody, and how her fingers sought his, not with urgency, but with quiet confidence. They did not discuss perpetuity. They communicated solely through touches, through glances, through breaths exchanged beneath the shadow of thunderclouds now receding. Outside, the imprints of the horses gradually filled with water. The fire within crackled, and the 2 individuals who had been lost, not from the world, but from their own selves, began to re-establish roots together in soil made soft by rain. The sun ascended slowly, honey gold in hue, warming the frost that adhered to the tall prairie grasses. For the first occasion in weeks, the sky was unobscured, as blue as an infant's eyes, as expansive as a long-held breath finally released. The tempest had subsided, not merely in the heavens, but between them. The wind had ceased. The peril was no more. Sam Ward stood near the barn, a pail in one hand, and a well-used bridle draped over his shoulder. His coat bore patches at the elbows and was flecked with hay, but his bearing had altered, less like a man burdened, and more like one firmly grounded. Behind him, the cabin no longer resembled a sepulchre. Smoke ascended from the chimney in a distinct, unwavering stream. Inside, Nahili moved through the morning illumination barefoot, her hair plaited down her back in a single dark strand. She did not hum as she attended to her tasks. That was not her manner, but a rhythm now characterized her, a sort of composure that had been absent before. She minced herbs, folded linens, and carried water without pausing. Each action was her own, freely undertaken. There was no longer any apprehension in her hands. Sam observed her from the window as she spread a blanket out to air. The shawl she donned was no longer his wife's. It had been adorned with new trim, a band of the blue material he had acquired in town, stitched into its lower edge. Her own creation now, her existence interwoven, the past honored, not supplanted. He turned from the window and retrieved the small parcel near the hearth. Within it lay a necklace, 3 carved bone beads on a leather thong, the type his own mother had worn during his childhood. He held it for an extended moment, his thumb caressing the central bead, before placing it with care on the table where Nahili would discover it. A present, nothing elaborate, merely a sign that conveyed, "I perceive you." I select you. Unspoken offerings had become their mode of communication. Outside, the road extended towards the town, dusty and sun-scorched now, its memory of snow diminishing. There was an issue that required addressing, one that could not be postponed. Sam saddled the horse, and Nahili stepped onto the porch, drawing her shawl more closely. She uttered nothing initially, but her brow creased slightly. "You are riding to town," she observed. He nodded. "They will have inquiries regarding why the Comanche arrived and departed without bloodshed." She regarded him. "You will inform them. I will tell them what they need to comprehend." She looked beyond him towards the horizon. "They will not believe it. They will accept what they prefer. They invariably do." A silence. "Do you wish for me to remain here?" she inquired, though her intonation made it evident she was not apprehensive about accompanying him. Sam paused. "I desire for you to do as you decide." She looked at the horse, then back at him. "Then I choose to ride with you." He assisted her in mounting, not from a sense of gallantry, but because he wished to. Her fingers grazed his wrist as she found her seat in the saddle, and he sensed the current of her trust. They rode in tandem, the wind gently pulling at their coats, the hooves striking the earth with a cadence that felt like a heartbeat and a promise. As they neared the town, Sam squared his shoulders. He could already perceive the scrutiny of eyes. Townspeople took note of occurrences, particularly when a Comanche woman rode in alongside a man like himself, reserved, marked by past pain, too advanced in years for anything as irrational as hope. They dismounted before Miss Lahi's establishment. She was already positioned in the doorway, arms folded, lips pursed. Her gaze shifted first to Nahili, then to Sam, then to the distance, as if attempting to arrange the elements into a narrative she could accept. "Well," Lahi remarked, "you returned her then." Sam met her gaze. "She is not merchandise." Lahi did not assert that she was. The older woman's eyes flicked again towards Nahili, though I doubt the respectable citizens in town will look favorably upon this situation. Nahili stepped forward before Sam could articulate. Her voice was serene, yet her words were incisive. "I am not a situation. I am a woman who made a choice." Lahi blinked. A hint of irritation showed in her, but she offered no reply. She merely moved aside as they went in. Inside, the store carried the scent of dust and cinnamon. A few townspeople halted their browsing. A quietness permeated like ink spreading in water. Sam maintained an upright posture, hands relaxed at his sides. He did not glance at Nahili. It was unnecessary. Her presence grounded him like the earth beneath the wind. They gathered what they required: flour, a small quantity of sugar, coffee beans. At the counter, Lahi tallied the purchases in silence. Before they departed, Sam stated, "We shall be wed by springtime." The words were soft, yet every individual in the store heard them. A murmur coursed through the room like wind rustling dry grass. Nahili did not recoil. She turned and walked out, leaving behind only the fragrance of sage from the bundle secured at her belt. Outside, Sam exhaled, not with relief, but with determination. That had been the tempest he had dreaded more than any weapon. The tempest of condemnation, of gossip, of history attempting to lay claim to them. But it had not prevailed. They journeyed home unhurriedly, the sun descending behind them in hues of gold and russet. A hawk circled above, its wings spread wide against the light. Nahili tilted her countenance to the wind. Her eyes were distant but not unfocused. When they arrived at the cabin, the light was a deep amber. Sam unsaddled the horse while Nahili walked to the cedar tree, her fingers tracing its trunk. The very one she had collapsed beneath weeks prior, the same one that had signified a form of demise. Now it stood at the brink of something entirely new. That night, the fire burned low and with a rich glow. Nahili sat at the table, her fingers fashioning a new braid into a strip of leather, the ends looped for reins. Sam observed her from his chair, one boot propped on the hearthstone, a mug held in his hands. "Will you feel their absence?" he inquired. She looked up. "My kin." He nodded. She pondered for a while. Some, not all. I missed the person I was before they dictated who I must become. Sam gazed into the fire. I comprehend that sentiment. She stood, approached him, and cupped his face with her hands. You never articulated what you desired. He looked up at her, his eyes lined yet unwavering. I desired tranquility, but I did not understand its meaning until you came through my doorway. She kissed him then, not the hesitant sort born of inquisitiveness, nor the ardent kind born of longing. It was a kiss that settled within him, steadying something that had been adrift for too long. A kiss that created space for quietude afterwards. In the subsequent days, they established a new cadence. She resumed carving, shaping forms into bone, into antler. He mended the fence with her at his side, their hands frequently brushing. He instructed her in firing a rifle. She taught him to follow rabbit tracks by the way snow yielded in their imprints. They conversed often now, not because silence no longer suited them, but because there was delight in sharing it as well. The town's scrutiny softened with time, not universally, but in some instances. Miss Lahi began reserving fabric Nahili might appreciate. A boy from a neighboring farm requested her to demonstrate how to weave arrow fletchings. The world did not transform instantly, but it yielded subtly, like grass under a fresh breeze. One evening, Sam sat by the fire with a cradle resting on his lap. He carved it slowly, meticulously, in the same manner he once had for an infant who never opened her eyes. This one was distinct. This one was for the life burgeoning within the curve of Nahili's abdomen. She leaned against the doorway, observing him work, her hands cradling herself as if in answered prayer. "You are changed," she observed. He looked up. "In what way?" "Lighter, as if your shadow does not adhere so tenaciously." He chuckled softly. "It might be because I no longer bear it in solitude." Outside, the stars were strewn across the prairie sky, brilliant and boundless. The fire crackled, the baby stirred, the man carved, and the woman who had been pursued, muted, and possessed stood unvanquished, cherished, chosen. In the quietude between breaths, Sam murmured, "Certain narratives commence with fire, others with ashes, but ours initiated the instant I unlatched that door." Nahili approached him, laid her hand upon his heart, and whispered in return, "And I entered." And so they stayed, two serene souls who had once dwelled in tempests, now enveloped in firelight, and constructing an existence not of dominion, but of agreement, not of deliverance, but of acknowledgement. They had weathered the arduous journey. They had reached their haven. 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 They had reached